Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's keeping fine. See 10 past 8, so it's about 10 past 2, or maybe even 10 past 3 over there, Central Time. Yeah, something like that, if I remember rightly. Because I think your clocks go back this weekend. Anyway, I've got a little supplement, very short little article that I'll go to first. Oh, hi Millbilly, hi JD. I didn't start following the case till, as I say, I got alerted to it by my daughter late February, but I only heard about it then. It was mid-March before I watched it. It was almost instantaneous that I got in touch with Herman, and I had my first actual phone conversation with him. I'm going to say middle of April 2016. So I've got an article that goes back way back to January of 2016. So I'm going to carry on with some more of the Kathleen Zellner's motion. But what I really wanted to do was, well, I'll tell you what, actually, read tribute to my pal. There we go. So this certainly does, Millbilly, this certainly keeps the head warm. I'll tell you that much. It is fantastic, these hats. And I've got my Avery hoodie, so, you know, I am definitely set for the winter, as it were. Let me take you to the article in the is it the I think it's an article in the Wrap, as it's called. Let me make sure that everything is working fine. In case you weren't aware, it's Beanie for Brendan is what we're doing at the moment. More of that to come over the next few days. So let's, as I say, let's bring up this article, because as a little supplement, we looked at Mr. Carl Wardman, and hopefully that's coming through. Okay, yes. So this is an article from January the 12th, 2016. This is 3 months at least before I knew anything about the case. And obviously, yes, we can go back and we can come across new, articles, but I have never seen this before. And this was quite interesting because it says, making a murderer, why Stephen Avery says juror was out to get him. So let's come on down. So Steve believes that a juror in his case had it out for him, and he's filed legal papers saying as much. Remember, this is even before, I think this is even before Kathleen Zellner came on board. In papers filed with the Wisconsin Court of Appeals on Tuesday, Steve, the subject of the Netflix documentary series Making a Murderer, claims that a juror in his trial repeatedly stated that Steve was effing guilty. Where have we heard that before? Many a time from guilties. The repeated assertions, Steve claims, tainted the jury through direct or indirect influence. He goes on to claim that imitation of jurors requires a new trial. Steve's legal filing also claims that the juror, identified as Carl Wardman, told other jurors, if you can't handle it, why don't you tell them and just leave? Carl Wardman had preconceived guilt of Avery. This deprived Steve of an impartial jury trial due to juror Carl Wardman's statements that were made in the jury room, in the restaurant, in the motel, Avery wrote in the papers. Steve is currently serving life in prison for the murder. For the murderer, I think it's just meant to be murder, of photographer Teresa. Let's have a look now. Yes. Late last week, however, he acquired new counsel, taking up the case. Our Illinois-based attorney taking up the case is Illinois-based attorney Kathleen Zellner, who specializes in wrongful convictions, and the Midwest Innocence Project legal director Tricia Bushnell, who will serve as Steve's local Wisconsin counsel. And that's all there is to that. That's just a very short little article. But I'd never seen what comments had actually been attributed to Carl Wardman, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Now let's get back to what we're meant to be looking at. So this was where we left off the last time. So carrying on, the circuit court ignored Dr. Palanik's findings that the numerous fibers were found on the bullet's surface, some embedded in wax and others embedded on the bullet's surface. There is no question that the state's theory as to the cause of death was gunshots to Teresa's skull. The absence of bone particles on item FL completely refutes that it passed into Teresa's skull, as the state's expert, Dr. Jensen, opined. And he opined that on item FL. The circuit court completely misread, I don't know if it misread, Dr. Palanik's affidavit as requiring further testing. So he does say that he wants further testing. Good. Oh, hold on a sec. No such testing is necessary because Dr. Palanik has established that the state's contention that item FL caused Teresa's death is false. I suppose that in itself, it's obvious that it's you don't need to do any more testing, I suppose. Yeah. If it's even if the wood isn't from Steve's garage, it doesn't really matter. But no, this is all nonsense based on the fact that Sutkieweicz didn't want to really talk about anything other than just deny. Anyway, let's carry on. The circuit court also deliberately sort of abdicated all responsibility for doing what was fair. Concluded that State versus Allen was inapplicable because the reports are speculative and lack conclusions. I remember Kathleen Zellner, I'm sure it was Kathleen Zellner, saying, that this is not the job of Angie to go against, to deliberately try and pit herself against her experts. The circuit court failed to acknowledge its errors in interpreting the expert reports and determined that the reports, contrary to the experts' own opinions, were interim and therefore speculative. The circuit court, this is item 6, the circuit court erred as a matter of law in applying the wrong standard to the newly discovered evidence. In its October the 3rd, 27 ruling, the circuit court stated the defendant attached numerous reports to his latest motion, arguing that the forensic tests conducted in the reports were not available at the time of the defendant's trial in 2005. However, the defendant's arguments ignore an important question. Were the tests available at the time of the defendant's previous motion pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 97406 or any of the other appeals or motions filed after trial. The Circuit Court ruling that in order for evidence to be new, the testing methods used to obtain it must not have been available at the time of Steve's prior appeals and or post-conviction motions is manifestly erroneous. That is not the standard. When moving for a new trial based on an allegation of newly discovered evidence, a defendant must prove, firstly, that the evidence was discovered after his conviction, 2, that he was not negligent in seeking the evidence. Well, how would he know about this evidence? And 3, the evidence is material to an issue in the case. And 4, the evidence is not merely cumulative. State versus McCallum. If the defendant is able to prove all 4 of these criteria, then it must be determined whether a reasonable probability exists that had the jury heard the newly discovered evidence, it would have had a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt. If the defendant was not negligent in failing to ferret out the evidence on which he relies, then a prior motion brought pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 97406 does not procedurally bar the claim. State versus Edmonds. Defendant's prior post-conviction motion did not bar a successive post-conviction motion based on newly discovered medical evidence calling into question the state's evidence related to shaken baby syndrome. Wow. In State versus Brian Avery. There's a lot of Averys going around. I was watching the film Zodiac, and of course, one of the main parts played by Robert Downey Jr. in the film is that of Paul Avery. So pretty good name, that, I reckon. Anyway, in State versus Brian Avery, let's get back to what we should be doing, Paul. The defendant filed a motion under Wisconsin Statutes 97406 over 12 years after his conviction and argued that during that time, new technology had allowed him to develop new evidence of his innocence. The Circuit Court denied the motion, but now, this is interesting, isn't it? The Circuit Court, of course, has no interest whatsoever in reversing any convictions. I'd love to know if there were ever any circuit courts actually overturning a conviction. But the Court of Appeals reversed the post-conviction order and remanded the matter for an evidentiary hearing, concluding that the defendant had made a prima facie claim of newly discovered evidence. The appellate court applied the test discussed from Edmonds and determined that the defendant met all 4 prongs to the test. As to the first prong, the defendant was not required to establish when the new technology was available. The defendant satisfied his burden by simply showing that the technology was not available at the time of his trial. Similarly, Mr. Avery, that is Steve now, not Brian, Steve Avery, in the case at bar, has satisfied his burden. No, that is, yeah. This is all to do with Brian Avery, isn't it? Yes, Brian Avery. Similarly, Brian Avery, in the case at bar, has satisfied his burden by setting forth in his motion that the new technology was not available at the time of trial. The new technology is as follows. Hold on a sec. Right, okay. So I don't know whether we're talking about Stephen Avery or Brian Avery, but anyway, I think the same thing applies to both. It's late on a Friday night. It's getting confusing. Anyway, firstly, Dr. Palanek examined item FL using state-of-the-art technology not available at the time of Steve's trial in 2007. Dr. Palanek Palanek's examination of item FL and his findings have produced new evidence that is totally inconsistent with the state's theory that Teresa was shot in the head, while lying on Steve's garage floor. Dr. Palahniuk, using a 2016 microscope to analyze the hood latch swab and conducting a series of experiments, has offered the opinion that the swab was not used to swab the RAV4 hood latch. John Ghan, a forensic fire expert, has conducted more experiments on human cadavers than any other fire forensic expert in the world since 2012. Well, that is impressive. I mean, Americans, their world is America. But if that is actually true in the world, that's pretty impressive. Okay, Dr. DeHaan's experiments refute the state's theory that Teresa was burned in Steve's burn pit. Now, Dr. Reich was able, through the use of new source testing, RSID testing, to eliminate the following rich sources of DNA from the hood latch swab: either blood, semen, and saliva. The circuit court never addressed the undisputed fact that Steve has demonstrated through Dr. Reich's experiments and source testing that the DNA on the hood latch was planted. There is no innocent explanation for the large quantity of DNA on the hood latch if blood, saliva, and semen are ruled out. The only plausible explanation is that the large quantity of DNA came from the illegally seized groin swabs, which Dr. Reich said would provide a comparable quantity of DNA as that found on the hood latch swab. Ultimately, the question is whether there is a reasonable probability that the jury, after hearing the new evidence, would have reasonable doubt as to the movement's guilt. And obviously, we're not talking about a jury that include corrupt jurors like Carl Waldman, who were obviously there to try and make sure that the result went the state's way. The question has been answered about the state's theory that item FL caused Teresa's death. It did not. Full stop. Therefore, Teresa Halbach's DNA was planted on item FL. Also, Teresa's body was not burned in Steve's burn pit. This question is not answered by simply weighing the evidence, because a jury can find reasonable doubt even if the state's evidence is stronger. This same principle is applicable to the prejudice prong of Strickland and the determination of whether the state committed a Brady violation. Mosley versus Aitchison and Williams versus Taylor, holding that the application of a preponderance of the evidence standard to analyzing prejudice under Strickland is improper. Beeman versus Friesmeier, 7th Circuit, 2015, holding that the reasonable probability standard for materiality of suppressed evidence is less rigorous than a preponderance of the evidence standard. 7. Steve raised sufficient reason as to why these issues could not have been raised in prior motions pursuant to Wisconsin Stat 97406. In its October 3rd, 2017 order, the Circuit Court found that Steve failed to overcome the procedural bar to having his motion heard. In so ruling, the Circuit Court held there is no argument or showing of a sufficient reason as to why these issues could not have been raised in prior motions. Without such sufficient reason, these arguments are precluded from any subsequent motion. State versus Escalano-Naranja. Let's hold it there, and we'll look at the standard of review next. Let's come back to here. Let's come back to that and back up to that. and I can switch off that, and I can just quickly go through and thank everybody for joining with us this time. So Darkside, hi Darkside, Millbilly, Mystic Jinx, Dr. Siltman. My goodness, this must be either very early morning or very, very late at night. I'm puzzled. Anyway, nice to see you. Along with Bob Bailey. Sorry, not Bill Bailey, Bob Bailey. I don't recall. Jerice. Yep. Hi there, Jerice. And Millbilly and Jerice is here, and Mystic Jinx and Darkside and Jerice and Jay Peacock. Hi, and JD and Anthony Connor. Hi, hello from Dublin. Hi there. Nice to have you on board. Greetings from Scotland. Darkside JD, Polly Esther. Hi there, how you doing? And let's see, who else have we got here? We've got, let's get this up to the top. Yeah, I think that's everybody. Well, nice to see you all, and we'll carry on with the I'll carry on with the next part. I think we're getting very close to the end of this motion. And as I say, I've already decided really what I want to look at next. It's something that Hugh Fraser over there in Sydney, Australia, has been wanting us to look at for a while, and that is, I'm sure that Doctor, you would agree with me. One of the worst examples of cognitive dissonance is when you hear Luke Berg testifying before the Seventh Circuit en banc court in Chicago, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. So I want to go through all that he said and all the interruptions he gets from the various judges, because as far as the an article I read by the it's the channel that Aaron Kellner went and is working for, Law News Network, and it describes the Seventh Circuit as having Luke Berg on toast, as it were, you know, and they probably did. They did completely shoot holes through what he was saying, but of course, you've still got Hamilton and Ghan and Sykes and Easterbrook to blame for that horrendous miscarriage of justice. Anyway, so that's probably I'm pretty sure that's what I want to look at next. So we've nearly finished the motion, Kathleen Zellner motion, and any other things I come across in the meantime, I will obviously pop up. And of course, Monday comes around pretty soon, doesn't it, Millbilly and Dr. Siltman? It always comes around pretty quick. I'm sure there's going to be plenty other things that we can look at as well. There's just so much stuff. It always used to make the dude laugh, and I always used to wind him up when somebody would say something about, "Oh, you've just watched a documentary. You've been misled by making a murderer. You're just joining on the bandwagon of popularity of this documentary. And when you think the amount of research he did and the amount of videos that he's done and the time that he's put at it, it was just ridiculous. But anyway. Yes, Darkside, I did. So he got back in touch with me. We were going to have a chat the next day. We never managed that. He said, "Look, things are really busy." I said, "Yeah, I quite understand. It's like probably weekends are a good time to chat." What we sort of started with was he wanted to sort of establish certain facts. We didn't get very far on his idea that let's establish certain facts. So anyway, let's wait and see where we go. Okay. So let's hope that you all have an enjoyable evening. And as I say, tomorrow at some point, I know that Speaking with Conviction, Diane and a few of us, I think Jerome and Sharon and Jane, hopefully myself, I'm trying to think who else, get together, have a wee chat about things, seeing as it is as I say, the 15th, tomorrow it will be the 15th anniversary of Teresa's visit to photograph Barb's van. Okay, I'm going to say cheerio, and we'll catch you all soon. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now. Bye-bye.